Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode of the Servant Leaders Mindset podcast. Today, I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Eddie O'Connor. Dr. Eddie is a professional speaker, clinical, and sports psychologist. He specializes in helping individuals remove barriers to reach their peak performance. He's also an author and has an online course called The Psychology of Performance: How to Be Your Best in Life. Welcome to the show, Dr. Eddie.
Hey, thank you so much. Great to be here.
So, I'd like to start out by asking you, you started your career as a clinical psychologist. So, what led you to specialize in the practice of or the psychology of performance?
Yeah, I was blessed. I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist. Even I grew up in the Bronx, and there's always like fighting and stuff going on. They do that in the Bronx, but even the bullies or whatever would come to me with their problems. So there was always something that I knew that psychology was it. So never doubted it. And I had a mental block when I ran track in high school. I
Mm,
just couldn't break this particular number. And I mean, interesting story. I was running. Well, for those who are listening, if you're runners, you realize I wasn't really that fast. I had a great, I didn't have a lot of physical talent, but I was mentally committed. But I was trying to break 2:10 in a half mile, and I was running 2:11, 2:11, 2:11. And that was junior year and all my senior year. And I would come across the finish line not tired at 2:11. And then I
mm,
would go off and I would throw up afterwards as if I was exhausted. And it wasn't until later on that I had realized what was going on was that breaking 2:10 was so important to my athletic identity. I was overinvested in my athletic identity that my brain shut me down in performance so that I wouldn't so that I would always have an excuse, basically. So that I'd never really fail because I'd come across the finish line and be like, oh, if I just ran faster, I could do it the next time. Now, the craziness about that, as you know, is that of course I was still failing. But the emotional protection by allowing myself to still have an excuse was very interesting to me. Now, the good news is I did break 2:10 last race in high school. I don't know if my coach was a little fast with his thumb, but officially I ran a 2:09. And when I went to to college, I knew I wanted psychology, and I didn't even know this was a thing until the last class I took in college. It was sports psychology. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like there's actually something there. I remembered what was going on with me in high school, and then just other things that we all go through. I had performance anxiety, perfectionism, this achievement drive, over identification with what I achieve as a part of my worth. So it really resonated with me like, oh my gosh, there's a whole field that this could go in. And so I wanted people to really excel, but right away I knew that it wasn't always about, setting the right goals and being positive and being confident. Oh, that's great. But it's really much more about what are the things that are getting in not only my way, but everybody's way is what I'm finding. And that's the true way to excellence. And so that began my career and my focus.
interesting, fascinating. So, when we first talked, you told me that you were a Christian.
Mhm.
So, I'd like to know if you could tell the audience, how does your spiritual life inform your practice? Or
Well,
does, or does it at all?
oh, of course it does. We have to have
Mhm.
God at the center. Well, it really starts off personally. Like, so I was Catholic and growing up, in a Christian faith my entire life. But honestly, what was in the center of my life was achievement. I mean, again, you saw that wasn't working in high school, and while it got me a PhD and some other accolades as I went through, it ended up being this never-ending treadmill of never feeling fulfilled. And so, how it ties into me personally was, I got better in my life by realizing that I had to put God at the center. I had to truly submit to Him. Truly had to, align myself with His culture, not the culture of the world. Because the culture of the world, is telling us that we have to be better, stronger, faster, richer, more powerful. And I guess the way I'd put it is it goes in. It's like I can't preach to my clients if they're not Christian, for example. I
Mhm.
can't share that. But
Right.
for one, if I have athletes that are, we talk about how does this overlap. Like I believe God cares about sport because in the Bible He talks about focus on what is excellent and what is good. We talk about character. We talk about perseverance and how it strengthens, and that's a gift from God to be build perseverance. So there's different, like, how to deal with anxiety. Philippians 4:6-7, being able to, do not be anxious about anything, but in all things with thanksgiving. So there's a lot of things from there that we can overlap, but mostly it ends up being, when you're a child of God, then you get to do these things. Like, there's no longer the pressure for me to have to win or to do these other things, or particularly to be a sports psychologist. I got a lot of achievement that I wanted to do in that. But really, where it switched for me was like, no, now I get to do it. God made me a healer. That's his role. That's what he wants me to do. And
Mhm.
because of my love for him, now I'm able to do it. And I can do it without the weight and the pressure of earning my worth, because I have that in God and his son who died for me. So it really takes all of that pressure off. And you'll see that with athletes. So when I see them coming in and they're focusing so much on having to win and things of that nature, if we can take that spiritual aspect, certainly we'll talk about that. But even if they're not, it's through that experience that I know, hey, I have to get these people unhooked from the winning is everything.
Excellent, excellent. Um, so you've said also in your bio that you're not a fan of positive thinking.
Yeah.
So, what is your understanding of positive thinking? Because I think people have different understandings of it. And why do you think it's not the most effective way to improve your performance?
Yeah, this is going to get a lot of people's attention, and you're going to notice an uptick in my energy here because I, because it really bothers me. It angers me, um, because it's an oversimplification. Now, I've learned over the years, though, that I have to back off on this, because it's not like positive thinking doesn't work. It's not that it's wrong. It's not like my colleagues are doing, the wrong thing. We know that when we're positive and when we're confident, things are a heck of a lot easier. We do well. Great. When you can be positive, when you can be confident, 100% by all means do it. At the same time, I find, though, when you try to be positive, there are many times that you can't. If you have a career ending injury, how are you supposed to be positive about it? I worked with chronic pain. How are you
Mhm.
supposed to be positive about that? When you lose a game, when you make a big mistake, it's nice to say, well, just, think of the positives, but it's really creating a battle inside of yourself, because you have these emotions because you lost something of great value. Or when you're anxious, you have things to worry about. We all do. This life is difficult. I'm going into a competition again, for example, somebody's going to lose. One of us should be anxious about it because it's going to be one of us.
Right.
And so it doesn't really work all the time, because we are too often telling people to go into these anxious situations and be overly calm. Or sometimes we don't have any right to be confident. Like, if I'm going in against, let's say I'm a 100th ranked tennis player and I'm going in to play the number one person in the world, am I supposed to really be confident? Am I actually going to believe the lies that I'm telling myself? Or is it much more effective to accept the negativity, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, the sadness that we have in our lives when it's appropriate to feel those things? To open ourselves up and bring those feelings along with us as we focus on what we need to do in order to get the result that we want.
Mhm.
See, that's what I think is magical for people. And in my experience, and the research supports it now with many more years, I've been arguing this for years, but the research supports it, that this openness to what is and dropping the struggle to control these thoughts and feelings
Mhm.
is the best way to be more psychologically flexible, so that you can move in the direction that you want to go. And so I'm not against positive thinking, but kind of, because if you're trying to force it, your experience, and everybody who's listening, your experience will tell you that there are times where it actually feels invalidating to be positive. That if your friends are telling you to, cheer up, I'll never forget, at my grandmother's funeral, my uncle hugged me and he's like, "Don't cry, she's in a better place." Like, was that supposed to comfort me? I knew darn well she was in a better place, but I was crying for me. I was crying for the loss, and
Right.
that felt so invalidating and so distancing. And so distracting. There's another part of my life where I was really getting screwed over, and everybody's telling me to just got to deal with it and move on, right? Really stuffing those feelings. And it wasn't until I took a half hour. I remember I was in the shower, I was crying, I was upset, and I decided to tell myself and say, Eddie, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to be upset about
Mm-hmm.
this. This
Mm-hmm.
person is dangerous in your life, and you've gotten hurt before. And once I embraced all the anger, you would think that I'd go on a tear and start getting revenge. But in fact, that's what I was doing beforehand. Once I accepted that I had every right to feel that way, this space opened up and I could think about the other people in my life and, well, what's the best way to address that? I was able to get back in touch with my character and say, who's the person that I want to be in this situation with this anger, as opposed to responding in it. When I stopped fighting the anger, I was
Mm-hmm.
able to become my best self. Now, did that make me happy? No. Did that get me what I wanted? No. Did I get screwed? Yes. But that was going to happen one way or the other. I at least maintained my integrity and I had my best performance in that situation by accepting it and not trying to be positive when in fact everything was negative.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent answer. And as a mental health professional, wouldn't you say that it's okay? You know, it's like denying your humanity. It's okay to feel and have those emotions, but it's just not okay to stay there. You know, you have to eventually move beyond it. Would you say that as a mental health care professional?
I would say that you're 100% right. And I would tweak the words a little bit, knowing how your listeners are probably going to hear that. So
Mm-hmm.
when we say, oh, it's okay, that's become such a cliche where I think people kind of feel like, well, if it's okay, then I should feel better. Or it's, like, oh, it's okay is kind of like a reassurance, like, oh, I did something wrong, but it's okay. Don't feel bad about it. Like when we make a mistake, people come up, it's like, yeah, it's a mistake, but it's okay. Don't worry. And it's sort of like just trying to make you feel better. I would make that a stronger statement. I'd say we have four basic human emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, and fear.
Mm-hmm.
We used to think there were six or seven. Lots of research was done, facial recognition studies to determine biological determinants of what emotions we have. So every complicated emotion we have comes out of one of those four: happy, sad, mad, and scared. How many of those are positive? One.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point,
Yeah.
if our human experience, if three-quarters of it is an unpleasant feeling, how ridiculous is it that we're expecting people to live in 25% of what it means to be human? And to my athletes and things of that nature, when you're in a sport and you're competing and you're losing and mistakes are being made and there's pressure, are we really supposed to just live in this confidence and happiness and positivity? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. It's too much of a distraction and a battle when the reality is that we as a culture, we would like to open up. And that again doesn't mean that it'll make us feel better. The goal here, and you'll see this when I work in my success stories community and with my clients, I tell them right away, like, this isn't about making you feel better. Feeling better is a side effect. But even in the greatest things, in the greatest marriages, and the greatest successes that you have, there's always going to be adversity and pain. Like, we have to open up to it, but we want to talk about performance. And by performance, I don't necessarily always mean winning. Again, for the people out there, it might be living your healthiest lifestyle. It might be your personal best and whatever it is. It might be through a rehabilitation and sticking to your exercises. It could be having a wonderful marriage. Like whatever is important to you. That's what I mean by performance. Like we are all performers all the time. We have to make
Absolutely.
intentional choices about what we're going to do. Spirituality, that doesn't come by accident. Following
No.
Christ is not easy. It is maybe the most difficult decision that I've made. And if we just give in to our thoughts and feelings and impulses and want to feel good or listen to culture, right? So we have to be intentional about that. And there's pain involved with it. So how do we embrace that? That ends up being really the key is opening up to what is, but really having a clarity of what is important to us and making intentional choices to move in that direction.
Wow. Well, let's pivot a little bit here, and I want to talk a little bit more about anxiety because you mentioned it. So, and also since COVID, climate change, war, and other disasters that we've experienced over the past 4 years, anxiety seems to be at an all-time high. You know, in our country and also throughout the world. Can you tell me how, or tell our audience, how anxiety affects performance and how it can be managed?
Yes. Again, thank you for this question. I'm going to get almost as excited about this one as the positive because they tie in together. I'm going to tell you that, again, you should be anxious. Anxiety is a sign that you care about something. We are not worried about stuff that we don't care about. We always worry the most about our family, our kids, our parents. We always worry about, the sport that we're interested in. Like most of us don't like to lose, but if for me, if you beat me in football or in CrossFit, I'm going to be much more upset about that than if you beat me in, I don't know, checkers or something that I don't, care as much about. And it's important to realize that if you're anxious, because when you get anxious, it can be very frightening. And I understand that. And look, if you're having panic attacks or OCD or things like that, I'm not saying that all anxiety is normalized and just, deal with it. There are, extremes to that. Most people, however, though, in the anxiety that we carry, it makes a lot of sense. Our brains have a survival instinct to look out into the world for danger, to warn us of what could go wrong. Now, turtles have got a shell to protect them, and porcupines have quills, and a skunk has a spray. So, this genetic survival instinct that we have, we can't shut it down. And so, I invite you not to pathologize the anxiety that you're going through.
Mhm.
Anybody who's listening out there, let me ask you a question. Do you have a very good reason to be anxious about whatever it is that you're worried about? Your health, your kids, your performance? I think you'd probably tell me, well, yeah, like you're not crazy. You're not making something up.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you need to take medications for it and treat your anxiety? Maybe the best thing to do is lean into it and say, well, what's it trying to tell me? And then how do I respond? If I'm worried about my health, am I not eating well? Am I not taking my medicine? Am I not exercising? Maybe I should be nervous about my health because I'm not doing the right things. And that anxiety can fuel me into making those lifestyle changes. Tons of my athletes, they're worried about losing. And I'll tell you, when I ask them about how they've prepared, there's always more that they could have done. I want to take that anxiety and say, it's your body telling you that you care a lot about winning and you haven't done everything that you can. Oh, but I've worked so hard and I've done it. But you're anxious, which is telling me that you don't have the confidence because you're not fully prepared. Because
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're competing against other people, that they're training too. And if you're doing what everybody else has done, there's no guarantee that you'll win. That's sport, that's competition. If you're worried about your family, you love them, you want the best for them, and the world is a difficult place. So how do you lean into it and support them, be present with them? There's always something that we could do when we're anxious. And so rather than get distracted by our feelings, I invite you to lean into that anxiety, understand that it's one of those four core human emotions, and it actually has great validity. Now, again, inside my Success Stories community, we can get really caught up in our what if thinking and our perfectionism. And, this is easier said than done, but it's really where we start off with every athlete and high performer that I work with. It's about normalizing the anxiety, understanding where it's coming from so that it's not as much of a distraction, and then develop the skills so that you can actually perform with the anxiety. Because if you're focused on your anxiety, you can't be focused on what you're doing at the same time. So we want to create that safety in the anxiety, as we hopefully just have, and then teach the skills to bring your attention back to what you're doing so you can perform your best.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you mentioned tennis, and as a tennis fan and somebody who's played tennis for many, many, many years, um, I was amazed when one of the most talented, in my opinion, professional tennis players, Naomi Osaka, had quit playing due to her emotional state. So at the time she quit, she was one of the most successful players on the tour. How can having overwhelming success in life impact future performance?
Positively or negatively? Well, how are you asking?
So it's been a puzzle, I think, to everyone. That why did she leave? Why did she was at the height of her career, and so she decided that she could handle it. Obviously, she could handle a competition. She beat the best players in the world, but she eventually said she could not handle it emotionally. That was her public statement. So how does someone shut down after they actually obtained what they were trying to obtain in the first place?
Yeah. Well, again, I
I know
want
I'm not
to.
asking you to diagnose
Yeah.
Naomi Osaka. I'm not asking that. I'm just asking if anyone who's similarly situated, it could be many reasons, but someone's, what are some of the reasons perhaps? Because that's just one that is most public that I can think of. But I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. They arrive, so to speak, and then suddenly now they realize, I guess, they have to stay there or they have to do whatever it takes to stay there.
There you go.
And so that causes them somehow some anxiety or other types of psychological barriers.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, thanks for the clarification. And yeah, of course, I don't know her specifically, but it does bring up a couple of scenarios that can show up. And what we find is that, like, if you win a championship, winning a second championship is actually more difficult than the first. And part of those reasons are the most common are the heightened expectations from everybody else. So once you've done it, now not only from others, but even for yourself, you raise the bar. So to have that level of success is now the new norm. And that puts on pressure. Um, it goes right back, really, right to the point that I had said about, with my high school career and how the pressure to break 210 was there and how overwhelming that could be and what it means if we don't meet it. So imagine being in front of the world, being ranked so high, and now you have to stay there when everybody's coming out after you. Not only that, but when the first time when we're grinding to win a championship or to have that great business or to do something great, when we're doing it, we're often doing it in quiet or, behind the scenes. Nobody's really paying attention to us until all of a sudden we pop up on the scene. And now we don't have the privacy to do it. Our failures are more public. We're getting more scrutinized. And for the professional athletes out there, they've got more interviews and sponsorships and distractions that pull them away. They still will have only the same 24 hours in a day, but now everybody's coming at them for their time. And so that can be a really big challenge at the game's highest levels. And then there's the sacrifice that's involved. And this might be the biggest one. When we say that, oh, well, they won, and so everything should be great, we have no idea how much these athletes are putting in order to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a conference recently, and a gold medalist was talking about how it was finally time to put it aside, as you had said, and say, I want to live my life now outside of sport. Like, I want to have a husband, I want to have a house, I want to have a dog,
Yeah.
because those are things that ended up getting sacrificed again when people are trying to win gold medals. So that ends up, I guess, I would say the biggest ones, the pressures, the new norms, the expectations, but really personally on the inside, it's really respecting how hard it is to really be excellent. And when they win, it is wonderful, but it is not separate from the process and the years that they have invested in that for that one moment of winning. And then if you stop, if you take the foot off the gas, you're not going to keep winning for long. So how do you continue to do that? And it's amazing for many of these athletes that they can do it for years because of the intensity that it requires 24/7.
That's interesting. I like the way you talked about the pressure that when they finally do reach that top tier level, how that there's more pressure, not less. It's not like you can relax. I won this, I've done this kind of thing. It actually adds more pressure.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And a good segue into that would be too is how do you, and like I said, I think it's probably different for every person. And I think you're right. I think even with the case with Naomi, she just went away. I don't know if she's going to go away forever, but she went away and had a lot, now she has a life and she's doing other things. That is balance an issue? Is balance something that people also seek in addition to being competitive within a specific field?
Yeah. Again, you're really getting me with the vocabulary. Here's a lot of words that in the success stories community, I have a list of curse words, and these are some of them. balance doesn't exist. I did a whole presentation on this a couple of years ago.
Mm,
Um, and again, I go against these words because our words matter. The things that we
yeah, it
say,
does.
really influence. And so if you're out there and you're expecting to have a balanced life, you're going to be frustrated. I like to think of it more as that the best we can do is have harmony, because since we have 24
Mhm.
hours in life, and especially for the high achievers out there, if I want excellence in my family, in my work, in my spiritual life, in my health, in my athletics, and in my hobbies, it's impossible because excellence takes too much time. When I'm with my kids, I'm not in the gym or doing work. When I'm at work, I'm not in the gym or with my kids. And you see how this plays out. And so if I want true harmony, well, then I have to kind of figure out, well, at what point of what stage do I really want to emphasize? So, for example, maybe there's a race that I want to run. So I'm going to dedicate 3 months to training for this race over the summer, say. And so I will do that, and maybe I don't work as hard, and the kids understand. But then, in the fall, it's going to be the holidays. And so I'm going to decrease my training and spend a little bit more time with the family and the kids. And then I've got this really big project at work. So from January through June, I'm going to really kind of emphasize work and spend less there. And realizing that I'm going to have this up and down and balance it. And in the end, it might be balanced, or we might have a little bit more of a, I don't want to say that we're average in all the things, but you kind of have these ups or downs. But the real challenge is letting go of that idea that one, balance exists, and two, that we could be great at everything. And it's really sad as a recovering perfectionist myself. It took me years to accept this. But I'll tell you, I had a lot more peace in my life when I did, and my performance went up, which is interesting because I didn't have all the distractions and the mistakes and the pressure and the problems that came with expecting this perfection and having this high level in every area of life. Which doesn't mean that you can't excel in a lot of things. Some people do, but again, understand the dedication that that's going to require. You're going to have to be way above average in, how disciplined you are during your days, managing your time, being intentional about every action you can take. Again, things we can do inside the Success Stories community, it's possible. But for the average person out there, kind of wanting everything and having this balance, it just doesn't work. It's
Well,
impossible.
I agree with you that the perfect balance certainly does not exist. Um, but I also, like you said, that when it's tilted too heavily in one area, meaning I understand that for athletes, they have to really um, sacrifice a lot of the other aspects of their life in order to become who they are. That's really important. But I also think that like you were saying earlier too, that there are certain aspects of our lives that I don't think we can really, like our spiritual lives. If you can be the greatest athlete in the world, if you neglect having no, not having any spiritual life, that's going to impact your performance. So I agree with you. Words are really important, and people easily misinterpret them. But a lot of people talk about balance in life, but when you're tilted so far, you have to take the time to bring another dimension, I believe, to your life, in order to try to bring back into and later on, like you said, down the road, you might find some balance, but in the meantime, while you're sacrificing for the sake of performance, that you have to make those sacrifices. So I
Yeah,
agree with
and
you.
you bring up another great point. If we're going to use the word balance, we might bring it into sort of what does balance look like for me? So balance may not be equal. I'm taking it scientifically like equal, but balance might be, hey, I like it like this, 80% of this and 20% of that, and that's good balance for me. So that's a really good way to look at it. When you feel like with my clients, what I find is that when they're forced to work more, they say that they value family and God, but they're spending 80 hours a week at work. They're going to have struggles because their behavior is not matching up with their values. And so there's not a right or wrong about that, but it's a matter of saying, like, whatever you value the most is where you should be spending your most time. And there isn't a formula. And again, there may be those seasons, but I encourage you out there to recognize that if you do an assessment of what's important to you,
Mm-hmm.
have a crystal
Absolutely.
clear idea of what that is. And then just going back to the God thing too, once I kind of got him out of the silo and he wasn't just like my morning devotions, my Bible reading at night, or my church on Sunday, or my Bible study on Tuesday. Like those were all good things. And in fact, I started to feel overwhelmed about doing like Bible studies like 3-4 nights a week, and started to become overwhelmed. And I realized too, like those were again just kind of actions and stuff. It was more so when I was able to like talk to God all day and thank him on the football field, and ask for his help in a business meeting, that's when my spirituality was greater, because then it was like, at least in that aspect, it may not have been formal, and there are times when I can do retreats and things of that nature, but that was one where I could actually make that 100% of the time and walk with God throughout my life. So it's a little bit of a side there. I don't think we can necessarily do that with our kids. You can't bring them into a football game, but but I
Yeah,
certainly brought God on the field.
absolutely. That's wonderful. So, next question I have for you is how does focus influence your performance?
Again, wonderful questions. I absolutely believe that focus is the number one mental skill for performance. So I've had this discussion with my colleagues, and again, we've already gone through this. Sometimes people think confidence is number one, but we've already spoken about how we have to do things when we're not confident, and people have. The other big one that people sometimes say is that motivation is the most important mental skill. But I would challenge that too and say I do a lot of things when I'm not motivated. Again, how many times have you gone to
Mm.
school or go to work, or done your exercise where we don't feel like it because a commitment is stronger than motivation? But I have never ever seen anybody perform well when they're not focused. I've never seen that. And anytime we want to have our best performance, whether it's a conversation like this, right? You don't want me on my phone or, writing notes or doing something else. Like you and me, we're looking each other in the eye and we're focused in the present moment on the conversation. I'm listening to what you're saying. You're listening to what I'm saying. The listeners out there, you're focused on this podcast and you're getting the most out of it if you're in fact listening to the conversation that we're having. If you're multitasking, you're going to miss some important points that we're going to say. And I promise you, we're saying some good stuff here. When we multitask and we're unfocused, people feel like they're very productive, but actually you're going to miss details because we can only do one thing at a time.
Mhm.
I ask you, if you were going to have a surgeon operate on you, do you want him or her like kind of singing songs or doing something else in the background, or do you want them laser focused as they're cutting you open? I think the answer is obvious. So focus by far is the number one mental skill, and the great news is that it is a skill. Often we don't realize that. We talk about how our memory's going, or or we don't have focus with this or that, but this is something that can be trained. It absolutely can be trained. And so if you're willing to do the work, because unfortunately it does all take work, but if you're willing to do the work, you can improve your focus over time.
So, in addition to helping athletes, you also work with entertainers, performers, people in music. Is your approach different with someone in the arts than an athlete? Do you have a different approach? Do they have sort of, do you have a different technique for them? Or is it
Um,
basically the same?
I would say that it's mostly similar because it goes back down to the same brain science and psychology. And that's what's great, because if you're not an athlete, and like I said, you just want to improve your life, you want to improve your health, I'm going to treat you like an athlete. So what I mean by the sports psychology and the psychology of performance, again, remember, is that the context is going to be different. So if I'm working with a football player, I work a little bit differently than I do a golfer because they have different performance challenges. So then if I'm working with somebody in the symphony, well, then they're going to have different challenges too. And then if I'm working with an actor or an actress, they have different challenges. And so the contexts are different. The skills that I teach in the Success Stories community, the idea, for example, of focus is very similar. The idea of how do I manage my anxiety is very similar. The content might be different, but there's still all certain thoughts and feelings. So it's a great question. I would say that there's a foundation that's very, very similar, but not only do I see the individual context different, I also see the individual person different. So it's also very important to kind of say that while there's a science to it, my brain's different than your brain. And I want to respect and see you as the individual and what this means to you according to your values. and what thoughts and feelings are getting in your way and what's reinforcing that. So I get much more into the specifics of the person, respecting the context of their performance.
Yeah. Well, you have shared some wonderful information with our audience, but I want them to keep getting that great information. So, if the audience wants to learn more about what you do, how do they reach you? And is there anything that you would like to let them know that they can also avail themselves of if they're interested in improving their performance?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. So my website has everything. I've got a lot of free resources, like my mental toughness in 60 seconds. It's a YouTube channel. I've got a link at dreddieoconnor.com. You can find that. So it's 60 seconds, 120 seconds of quick tips. So things that can help your performance right away. What I'd love to really help you with is you've heard me mention the Success Stories community. So this is a place where you can sign up for one-on-one coaching with me, as well as this online platform where all of the skills that I've talked about you can be taught as you can move through at your own pace. We've got mindfulness training, how to improve your sleep, focus, this skill of willingness, that ability to kind of learn how to feel those emotions and bring them along with you, clarifying your values. And then we've got a community that you get to do this with so you don't journey alone. So we've got other people. We do these team meetings on Zoom where, again, once a month we check in and we get to go around the room and see how people are doing and encourage each other. But I want to not warn you, but say, if you do want to improve your performance, I ask that you really make the decision to work at it. That sometimes psychology people think they want these quick tips or they want to make it easy, and that's not the way it goes. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you are willing to work, if you're really saying, I don't like where I'm at, my thoughts and fears and doubts are holding me back, or I got all this what if thinking, what if this goes wrong? What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's paralyzing you. If you're not sure where you want to go and you just want something more, but you need clarity, then those are the people that I'm inviting into the community. Again, you get to work with me one-on-one. You got these great modules that you can do at your own pace. And I would welcome you in and help you be that person that you want to be, to help you be your best when it matters the most. And again, I emphasize it because I don't want just a bunch of people to join. I want people to get results. And the first step is really making that decision yourself, saying, hey, I don't like where I'm at. I want to get somewhere else, and it's time to do something about it. Now, what's the difference between that and all the other YouTube videos out there? Well, that's why I say it's like having the one-on-one coaching with me at the same time, because we're in information overload. So, again, there's a bunch of videos and things like that, but you've probably already done that and you've maybe not followed up afterwards. That's where I created the community, because I wanted to be able to have a place where you stay in touch with me and I can support you along the journey, because it is a journey. You don't have to do it alone. So I would welcome you on the inside. And so when you get to dreddieoconnor.com, just click the community link and there's more information about it there. And I hope to see you soon.
Very good, very good. Well, Dr. O'Connor, thank you so much for taking the time, and you have really been an asset to our audience and the show. So, thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Best wishes.